Hello and welcome into the Week 11 Waiver Wire Show. I am joined here by Axton Harding. Missed you last week, man. Had Brandon Hay obviously filling last week. We have a lot of great names to be diving into today. It might be Week 11, but there's still some pickups that I think we're all excited to be talking about because listen, unfortunately there are injuries, unfortunately there are buys, unfortunately things haven't worked out as we thought, but there are still options that we're going to get you to that championship still. How you doing, Axton?
I'm doing all right. I think, like we talked about before the show, it's taking it day by day, staying busy, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, we got Thanksgiving around the corner. Everything's about to get a little bit crazy, especially in the football escape. You know, we got a lot of games coming up. I mean, we're getting through those bye weeks, so all of a sudden everything's starting to get towards that final push, the final trade deadlines of all your leagues. But before obviously all that happens, we're going to get into the waiver wire pickups. Before we do that, I want to make sure that you are following the IDP guys on Twitter as well as subscribed on YouTube, where you're probably watching right now. That is, where all of our content comes out. So where on YouTube, a ton of short form content comes out, long form content comes out, whatever you want in terms of the way you ingest your fantasy content. There's a way for it there, as well as on the website at idpguys.org. And of course, you can check out our Twitters at Michael__Sicoli for myself and at Harding_3 for Axton here. So let us jump into it because we got to talk about the defensive lineman of this group. It is interesting this week. We've been pretty. I think we've been pretty good the last few weeks. Last week I called out for the Raiders D line to expose the Colts. They did not do that, so that was a little bit disappointing. But Javon Hargrave had a big day, 13 tackles and a sack. Justin Houston was on bye, so hopefully he continues that good form this coming week. And we brought up Draymond Jones, who only had 2 assisted tackles and a QB hit, so got close to it, just didn't get the job done in true Denver fashion this year. So let's try to get back on track. Lorenzo Carter is the name I want to start off with. That is the Atlanta linebacker / edge. I am much more interested in him if he is listed as a defensive lineman, which he is on MFL. He is not listed as such on not listed as that on Sleep. I believe not on Sleeper, but on Yahoo he's listed as a linebacker. So this is more so for where he's listed as a defensive lineman, like MFL. He's been very steady, tackle for a loss, with grabbing a few tackles along the way. It's typically around that 4 tackles and a TFL. He has the Bears this coming week, which screams keeping up the exact same thing of a solid 8 to 10 point floor with a much higher ceiling because he's also getting to the quarterback. He's 5th in QB pressures this year, which wouldn't feel that way based on his inability to finish the play and get the sack right now. But those type of things can come through, and it could come against a mobile quarterback like Justin Fields that holds the ball a little bit longer than most quarterbacks. So I like Lorenzo Carter as a pickup this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, with the mobile quarterback, it just kind of lends well to a little bit more opportunity to reach the quarterback because, as you said, he's leading the league, one of the league leaders in pressures right now. So hopefully he can maybe convert that on a rollout from Justin Fields. And this Chicago offense is actually starting to get make some headway and make things happen this year. So, also just whenever the offense is successful and playing all over the field, it just adds more opportunity for the defense to really get in there and make things happen.
Exactly. Chicago's been so impressive this year.
Tend to my son for a second. We'll be
all good. No problem at all, my man. Father always comes first.
Oh, yeah. Give me what you got on Josh Sweat. I'm going to see if I can tame the beast here.
Yeah, of course. And first off, good evening to you too, Marco. Always good to have you in the streams. I want to talk about Josh Sweat here. So this was somebody that we were very excited about in the beginning of the year. And honestly, he got a very good opportunity once Derek Barnett went down. And kind of spotty production. I think we were all a little bit disappointed for a bit. He wasn't getting a sack. He went from week 4 to week 4 to week 9 without getting a sack after getting, 2.5 in the first 3 games. But then he got home this past week against Washington. He had 3 tackles, which isn't a high number, but it's okay. I think he could do it against Indianapolis this week. And again, just because the Raiders didn't do last week doesn't mean I'm going away from the process of chasing defensive linemen who get heavy snaps and heavy pressures like Josh Sweat does against the Colts this week. I'm still going to chase those offensive tackles and the production that they're going to allow. So I like Josh Sweat as somebody that he's not available in every single league, but he is still available in a lot because of how hot cold he has been. So I think we're going to get more of a hot this week than the cold. We also have some breaking news. Just before the show started, Dallas Goedert was listed with a shoulder injury and is expected to miss time. Now Cooper Kupp is listed with a high ankle sprain. He is having surgery tomorrow. He is going on the injured reserve. So that will sideline the Rams receiver for the next 4 weeks at minimum. On a side note, which we're obviously going to be touching on when we get to the wide receiver and tight end portions. So if you had Goddard and Cooper Kupp, which I'm sure many of you do, those replacements we're going to be talking about very shortly. So be sure to stick around, check out, skip on through if you need to. All right. Any other thoughts with Josh Sweat? Do you want to move on to our number 3 name, Axton?
Go for it. Let's get on to Peyton Turner.
Right.
Saints, with Pete Werner being out, seems like they're kind of going to rotate their linebackers. Peyton Turner was one. He grabbed a sack and a few tackles for a solid day against the Rams this last week. He's had a tackle for a loss in 2 out of 3 games and 4 more tackles in each of those games. So just kind of seems like he's going to be in there more often than not and be able to reap the benefits of that open position while Pete Werner is sidelined.
Yeah, I think he's really. I mean, he's definitely been a disappointment since they drafted him in the first round. There's kind of a surprise.
Is he combo? I know he may not directly be taking Pete Werner. I could be incorrect there.
I think he's more of an edge than Pete Werner. I think Caden Ellis, who we brought up on the show last week, Caden Ellis, who we'll talk about with the linebackers, as the pickup for Pete Werner. But I think it's a good play. Peyton Turner this week against this Rams offensive line and Rams offense that has really struggled all year long. And I could see Malcolm Roach is an interesting name. He saw his highest snap share of the season. He's another defensive end for that Saints defensive line. And he got home this past weekend. I think it could be Peyton Turner this time. He's usually the guy that gets more snaps. I'm willing to stick it around one more week with him as a streamer type of thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you saved me there because I totally read your notes incorrectly there. So
no, all good. All good. And on the topic of Pete Werner, we're gonna get to linebacker anyway. Let's jump right over to that, the meat of the position, as I always say. And as well as if you're watching live right now, obviously if you're watching this afterwards, you're enjoying this lovely content so far, and obviously be sure to be checking out our Twitters and YouTube as I mentioned at the top. But if you're watching live, be sure to drop any questions you may have in the chat. If you have offensive, defensive, waiver questions, we'll get to it accordingly. And we just want to help you guys win your fantasy championship. So we will keep on plowing on through with the linebacker position. Last week, we talked about Sion Takitaki, who was on bye, and then, or 2 weeks ago, talked about him. He was on bye. He came back, 10 tackles in a TFL. He's running right alongside Deion Jones. We'll see how they work when JOK comes back. We talked about Blake Martinez last year, who abruptly retired the next day. We're going to be talking about that Raiders situation shortly. We're talking about Jalen Smith, who got 41 snaps. He had 5 tackles, a QB hit, a fumble recovery. Decent day. He got the work, at least. And Tay Crowder has been totally phased out of this system. He only played three or four snaps this past week. So it should be Jayon Brown and Micah McFadden the rest of the way. We mentioned Azeez Al-Shaair, who wasn't really going to play much in his first game back, so maybe it's more of a stash going forward. He got a lot more run because Dre Greenlaw was ejected halfway through the game. He got 3 tackles on 31 snaps. Pretty minimum usage, and not sure how much he'll factor in until Dre Greenlaw unless Greenlaw misses time. We're talking about Derek Barnes.
Shaair might be one that we just kind of have to wait and see on. I asked Leo on Twitter kind of what he thought about Al-Shaair coming back. And he thinks he's going to kind of take a backseat at so long as Greenlaw is healthy and in there playing most of the snaps. That doesn't mean that he won't get any time in there and get to play because he's been very efficient with how he's been or with playing in the past. But again, just kind of referring back to last week, it might be worth a stash in case he does see an uptick in snaps. So sorry to interrupt. Go ahead and continue.
No. Of course. No, it's important because we know what he can do. And when we talked about it a couple weeks ago, we talked about him having 100 tackle season. He's done this before. Mm-hmm. We were very familiar with him. So another name we brought up was Derek Barnes, the Detroit linebacker. He only got 2 tackles and 42 snaps. Really disappointing, especially with Malcolm Rodriguez out. So hopefully he gets back on track going forward. But just disappointing day for Derek Barnes and a day where the Bears did whatever they wanted against them. We brought up Caden Ellis, who I mentioned before, as that Pete Werner replacement. We were deciding between him and Zach Bond. On the show last week, we said Caden Ellis. He had 7 tackles, a sack, a TFL, QB hit if you award that, plus a forced fumble. Good day all around. As long as Pete Werner is out, Caden Ellis should be in. So let's get into the pickups for this week. I mentioned at the top of the linebacker segment the Raiders situation. And just a quick rundown. 2 weeks ago, Devon Diablo got hurt a couple snaps into this game. He was left the game with a forearm injury, was placed on the injured reserve last week. They have Denzel Perriman, who is a normal starter for them, but he got hurt midweek last week and missed the game. Blake Martinez was the starter last week and then came into practice and was like, wow, I was so bad, I'm going to retire, and abruptly retired on Thursday of last week. So this is a very bare bones Raiders linebacker group. We are down to a Diablo on the IR. We are down to Denzel Perriman, who missed this past week with injury, and Luke Masterson and Jayon Brown, both of which had good weeks, especially Luke Masterson, who missed some time with an injury in that mid-game and returned and continued to play on through. I am interested in both as long as Perriman is out. I have no idea the severity of Perriman's injury. It's been completely kept under wraps, and that makes it difficult. But in the meantime, I'm still interested in Jayon Brown as a near must pickup. He played every single snap. He was clearly ahead of Luke Masterson in this past game. Diablo is still out until week 14 regardless. They face Denver, Seattle, and the Chargers. Denver's a meh matchup. Seattle's a good matchup. The Chargers are a great matchup. All those games, Diablo is guaranteed to be out. Jayon Brown had 8 tackles, fumble recovery on 65 snaps. I'm willing to pick him up everywhere if you didn't get him last week.
Absolutely. Yeah, it kind of seems like Jayon Brown's really going to take charge here over Luke Masterson, and whenever Diablo does come back, I would imagine Masterson probably takes a bigger hit. On to our next guy. You put up Monty Rice, linebacker for Tennessee Titans. He outsnapped Dylan Cole this week, I assume. It's a Zach Cunningham injury, right? That's causing.
Yeah, Cunningham was placed on the injury reserve. I don't know if he's going to come back this year. At the very least, he's going to be out for a few more weeks.
Right, and honestly, as far as fantasy goes, losing Cunningham, God forbid, we don't want anybody to be injured. But as far as fantasy production goes for this Tennessee defense, I think you're probably looking a little bit better with Monty Rice rather than even a Zach Cunningham or your Dylan Cole. So next week he's got Green Bay, who's kind of been up and down. They had a pretty successful week this last week, but it's definitely an advantageous matchup for a linebacker coming in to fill in to make an impact. Come in and make some plays.
Yeah, it's gonna be difficult to. I put it down here, and I don't feel good put it down here, but because him and Dylan Cole has been playing ahead of him the last few weeks, and all of a sudden that switch flipped this past time, and obviously the Titans defense played very well this past week in very difficult situations where they were missing a lot of people, even more than they used to. No Jeffrey Simmons this past week, no Amani Hooker, no Caleb Farley got hurt. They were losing a lot of people. So I was impressed by Monty Rice. I think that the coaching staff showed some faith in him. And listen, whether it'll come or not, I do think he's worth chasing this late in the season if you are searching for those linebackers. And on that subject, Tyrell Dodson of the Buffalo Bills is the next name I want to be bringing up. Tremaine Edmonds, unfortunately, left the game with a groin injury. He was limited all week with a groin injury heading into it, so it could be a re-aggravation that could lead to a longer-term absence. We don't have more information at this time, but it is something that we do want to be tracking because that Bills linebacker is a very valuable role. So in the past, we saw Terrell Bernard fill that. This past week, Bernard didn't play in terms of he was kept on the sideline for Tyrell Dodson. And it really comes down to a matchup-proof type of thing. If Tyrell Dodson is going to be getting every single snap that Tremaine Edmonds is not, I'm picking him up and playing him. It's plain and simple. Tyrell Dodson is almost a must-play. And he's available in every single league because he's a backup right now. So that's a name that you should be chasing on your wires this week. At the very least, a 1 week play should Tremaine Edmonds miss. Obviously, if Edmonds plays, you can't play Dodson. But with any re-aggravation injury, I expect it to be at least a 1 week minimum on the sideline.
Yep. This, like you said, this Buffalo defense is pretty high-powered, and you really like to go after their replacements over any other over middling defenses and things like that, just lending better to tons of opportunity. So definitely worth a pickup in this defense that's going to see a lot of action. So let's hit him with the DBs.
Let's do just that. And I do see your question in the chat there, Marco, about Geno Stone. And honestly, we'll answer it right at the top of the defensive back segment. Let's just go right into that. Why not? So he's asking right now, as we head into defensive backs, should he hold on to Geno Stone? This is the Raven safety we were talking about, filling in for Marcus Williams. Really, he's logged 100% snaps in the last 3 weeks. He was always been a really a near every down player in his absence, and 6 tackles or more in 3 of the last 4 games. Obviously, a total dud this past week against the Saints. Well, not this past week, but 2 weeks ago. I'm willing to hold him as long as Marcus Williams is out there. I think he's a fine start as a guy who's getting 6 tackles almost every single week, and while that didn't happen against the Saints, because I think Geno Stones has that volatility. We talked about that when we mentioned him initially as a waiver wire pickup, a guy that has coverage skills, so he's dropping deep. So you're getting these 6 tackle games, and they're great, but 1 to 2 tackle floors are very real for him. So he has Carolina coming up, and I do like that matchup as an opportunity for him to get a turnover, for him to make a few plays. I'm willing to play Geno Stone at least 1 more week, especially as long as Marcus Williams is sidelined. Oh, I think you're muted, or I can't hear you, Axton.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. He's been a serviceable replacement, and I think it's worth holding on to for 1 more week. We're not just going to totally count him out for 1 more dud, especially with the likely explanation for maybe the lack in production. So might hold on to him for 1 more week if he's not going to give you much more production than that. Doesn't Marcus Williams come back in a short couple of weeks or so, or is he done for the remainder of the season?
Honestly, I had to double check that. I'll check that as a. Do you want to grab one of the names on the list? I'll fact check the. Marcus Williams is expected to return. I'm not exactly sure when that will happen. Either way, I do know that Geno Stone has been very impressive in that. In this stint that he's played, obviously Marcus Williams will be the guy when he comes back. They paid him to be, and he is that good of a player. John Harbaugh expects Williams to be back next month while they're pushing for that playoffs. That was a report as of November 12th. So we're at the very least, maybe he's back for playoffs. And either way, we're trying to get to playoffs right now. So still plenty of run time for Geno Stones, in my opinion.
I agree entirely.
All right, let's jump on over to the defensive backs then on a general sense. Last week, I brought up Kareem Jackson as somebody that was filling in for that, just the last minute standing of these Denver safeties. He had 5 tackles in pass defense, kind of a middling day. Brought up Dane Belton as the Xavier McKinney pickup, 4 tackles, interception, pass deflection, really nice interception as well by Dane Belton. And he's going to play deep just like McKinney does. So he saved that day kind of with that interception. And, sometimes his floor is 4 tackles and stat sheet, so he could have, or his floor could even be 3 tackles. So you just play it with ear. He has some good weeks, and some good weeks will be ahead of him. Curry Joseph, we mentioned, who had 7 tackles as well as 5 solo. He had a good week himself, and he is playing that every down role. He has played very well for this Lions team. And Eric Rowe, we brought up in Miami, only had 1 tackle and 50 snaps. I am now taking I don't care about the Miami safety situation, and I refuse to play the guessing game.
I don't know if anybody else can hear you, but I can't. We got some technical difficulties, but that's okay. I think I'll kind of take it until I can figure out his stuff here.
I think I think we're back here. We think we're back. Okay.
You were talking about being out on all the Miami Dolphins.
Yes, I am talking about not being willing to play that roulette wheel. And welcome, Sebastian, to the chat. I do see that question about Mike Williams. Let's get to that right after the defensive back segment, right at the top. But let's get into that. So we mentioned who we talked about last week. Let's talk about who we're talking about this week. PJ Williams is somebody I am incredibly excited about for this week. And he filled in incredibly well last week for Marcus May. As long as Marcus May is out, he suffered an abdomen injury last week. I believe it was in practice. PJ Williams should be in your lineup. He's played 100% of snaps. We talked about the absence of Pete Warner last week, obviously. And we talked about it before with Caden Ellis when I mentioned him last week, if you picked up either. But it increases the need to drop a safety in because backup linebackers are not the greatest players anyway. So you have some range there with either Tyrann Mathieu or PJ Williams. And PJ Williams is the guy that got that role. He had a lot of tackles last week. A whopping 11 tackles, and he faces the Rams. And I'm going to mention it every single time I mention the Rams. The Rams have been nothing but unimpressive this year. You take Cooper Kupp away from it too, and all of a sudden it's this is a bad offense. It might have been a bad offense with Cooper Kupp. Now you take away Cooper Kupp, and I'm not willing to play that game right now. So I like PJ Williams as a almost must start. As long as Marcus May is not in.
Yeah, absolutely. And this Rams offense is really just kind of falling apart, it seems like. I know Stafford is still dealing with his injury that's kind of been week to week. And with Cooper Kupp out, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for these defensive backs to get in there and make things happen and take advantage of some mistakes. Up next, we had Xavier Woods on here for Dallas Cowboys safety. We brought him up in the past.
Carolina. You think of
excuse me.
There's another Woods. No, you're good.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We didn't have it labeled here. That's my fault. Carolina. Anyways, we brought him up in the past. He's somebody that's kind of been serviceable. He's managed to create himself a decent tackle floor, getting 5, 7, 8 tackle weeks throughout the year so far. He's still widely available in a lot of your leagues and still going to remain a serviceable fill-in to get you through these weeks, try to get you through into the playoffs. Who do they play now? The Carolina Panthers.
The Panthers, we just said it before, right? It was we talked about Geno Stone. So they play the Ravens this week. And if we know anything about the Ravens, they can stay on the field offensively. And honestly, there haven't been too many chunk plays allowed. So what that means is longer time possession, which means more tackle opportunities for Xavier Woods. It's just not a team that's ripping off 70-yard plays right now because of the lack of playmakers they have as receivers. So I like Xavier Woods as well this week. Another name I'll throw out there on the same level of that Saints thing. Paulson Adebo has been so bad this year, but so good for fantasy. And I'm willing to chase that to the bank because he's being targeted like crazy. He gets tackles like crazy. This past week wasn't exactly that for the tackle floor, but in the past week it has been. And again, I mentioned the same thing with PJ Williams. He faces the Rams this week in terms of Paulson Adebo. This is the Rams that can't move the ball, are turning the ball over, and honestly, I think Stafford's going to really struggle this week. I think Stafford's going to be I think you can play the Saints defense if you were playing a DST this week. So I think Paulson Adebo could be a really strong play this week. Somebody that's going to get plenty of tackles as the Rams play catch up, and I'm all in on it.
Yeah, you pretty well hit it. This Rams offense is really just it's really just struggling. So this and it's kind of funny how fantasy IDP works whenever you have a bad defender who is, in terms of technical football and actually playing his position is terrible at it, can actually prove to be worthy fantasy wise, just for the simple fact, as you mentioned, that bad players tend to get targeted a lot. So the guys that are involved in all the high value plays, and if they can luck out and wrap up some shoestring tackles or get a couple of deflections here or there, can really yield fantasy value. So kind of like an Alex Singleton, just because he's mainly involved in a ton of the plays and he's just kind of there, he just kind of lucks into production. Now that's obviously changed with everything that's been going on, but just another example.
Yeah, Alex Singleton's actually an interesting name, and honestly, I could have brought it up with a linebacker. Weird switch in Denver this week for anybody that was tracking it. Obviously, Josie Jewell got the snaps, but that linebacker 2 role that has been dominated by Jonas Griffith this year, Alex Singleton out-snapped him this past week and filled up the stat sheet regardless. He had like 8 tackles on 50% of snaps, which for all we bettors out there that had the over-under of 9.5 that we felt confident on, it was a weird week to see the switch. We got a little bit sweating there. But listen, he got a lot of work, and honestly, if he is on your wire as well, if he's going to have that linebacker 2 role at the tackle rate that Alex Singleton gets, he could be very valuable as well. We didn't mention him because he's more higher owned and typically he's rostered, but he's someone to keep an eye out just in case. Now, let's get into those defensive questions. We have a few from the chat. We also answered the Geno Stone one. We have another one from Marco. And as well, obviously, if you are in the chat, feel free to drop them in. Do you think Jack Sanborn was a fluke last week? So we brought him up on the show 2 weeks ago, I guess now, right when the Roquan Smith trade happened, as well as if you checked out on Twitter when we mentioned it. I do not, because it makes sense for this Bears team that has been probably the most vocal in the NFL about playing for the future, right? Of trading Roquan away, of being willing to, just lose games, honestly. But Jack Sanborn's this rookie. He's a 4th-round rookie. It makes sense to get your rookies involved when you're in a losing season. And getting rid of a veteran, why would you put A.J. Klein in, another veteran, over Jack Sanborn? It doesn't make sense. So I think Jack Sanborn's going to continue to get this work. He's going to continue to get as many snaps as he can handle. And honestly, he played incredibly well this past week. And 12 tackles, 2 for a loss, 2 sacks, 2 QB hits. The stat sheet genuinely, and it doesn't always do this, but the stat sheet backs a very impressive player right now. And Jack Sanborn's playing well as addition to filling it up for fantasy. So I am all in on Jack Sanborn. I think he's a very good play rest of the season.
I'm 100% with you. Nick Morrow's has had the green dot for the Bears defense, and just the last few weeks he's had 6 tackles, 4 tackles, 5 tackles. 5 tackles, and really nothing else on the stat sheet. And Sanborn's come in the last couple of weeks and mustered up 19 tackles in that time, while also getting to the quarterback and grabbing a sack. To me, I don't see it as a fluke at all. As a matter of fact, I'd almost rather have him than even Nicholas Morrow at this point.
Yeah. I completely agree. And honestly, we could see a total shakeup in the offseason, but again, still a rookie guy who's impressing. And I'll add this as well. He had an interception this past week that was just called back on an unrelated hands to the face that was not him. Could have had an even bigger day. So I'm all in on Jack Sanborn, at least for the rest of the season for redraft purposes. Mm-hmm. All right. Let's jump on over to the offensive side, as well as obviously this is the IDP Guys waiver wire show. If you guys have offensive, defensive questions still, drop them in the chat. We'll be trying to get to it because obviously we're going to talk about offense now. Grant obviously put in here that he lost Cooper Kupp and Zach Ertz. He has no idea how he's going to fill those holes. Well, that's what we're here for, Grant. We're here to help you. We're here to fill the holes, and obviously a lot of people, not just Ertz, they also lost Dallas Goedert. So those replacements we're going to be talking about very shortly. Let's jump into the quarterbacks first. So last week we talked about Jared Goff, who had himself a nice little shootout type of day. I'm not sure did Jamal Williams steal almost every touchdown, because Amon-Ra got himself one. I think Jared Goff got it done on the yardage day, if I'm correct, right?
I want to say Swift got it in the end zone, but as far as like receiving touchdowns go,
right? Jared Goff finished.
I don't think Amon-Ra had any.
Yeah, Jared Goff got himself 1 passing touchdown, 236 passing yards. Disappointing day. I think we were all expecting a little bit more, especially in a day that we knew they were going to put up points. They put up 31. They just couldn't get it done for fantasy. And honestly, this is now several weeks of Jared Goff not really getting it done. He's had 1 fantasy relevant week since week 4, and now they don't have TJ Hawkinson. It might be time to kind of put Jared Goff to bed for fantasy streaming, at least until we have an incredibly juicy matchup, or Jameson Williams comes back and revives all of that. Next, we also have Jimmy Garoppolo, who did not throw a touchdown, which was very disappointing. But he did move to 10-2 when he doesn't throw a touchdown, because he is that game manager king. I don't know if we have ever seen or will ever see a better game managing quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. Just perfectly mid, Axton. Perfectly mid, like all things should be, So, but yeah, this way we're going to try to have a little bit more more explosive. Do you want to kick us off with either of these names?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and mention Marcus Mariota. He's been a guy that's kind of been a serviceable quarterback. Kind of probably been sitting on your waiver wire for most, if not all, this year. Goes up against Chicago in Week 11. I think he should have a great opportunity to continue doing what he's doing. He's really racking up most of his points on the ground with his legs, getting plenty of rushing attempts and plenty of yardage, finding the end zone, and he'll even throw for a pass or a touchdown pass or two here and there. So he's really been averaging right around like a smooth 15, 17 points a game. Nothing too flashy, but definitely wouldn't complain having that for bye week fill at the quarterback position.
Yep, completely agree. Another name I'll throw out there, Davis Mills. Oh boy, here we go. So this is definitely more of a QB2 play. If you talk about super flex, talk about QB, you got to start 2 quarterbacks, or maybe, quarterback has been that bad for you this year. Maybe you've been banking on Stafford and everyone else is rostered, and I am not playing Stafford without Cooper Kupp, period. I don't care about the matchup, and I would play Davis Mills over Matt Stafford this week. This is Davis Mills, who faces the Washington secondary, who has been brutally bad this year. I understand that they just shocked the world and beat the Eagles on Monday Night Football, which, won't lie, felt good. Felt good. I like seeing that. I like seeing an undefeated team fall. But, I mean, Jalen Hurts still had a good fantasy day, and it wasn't just because of his rushing line. And honestly, he had a few deep plays that just got coughed up. That fumble and the deep throw that Jalen Hurts made is a completely different game if that drive ends up in the touchdown. Different day for fantasy. And I think Davis Mills can take advantage of that. He's had a quietly it's a very up and down season for Davis Mills, as we kind of would have expected. But he does have 2 300-yard games in 2 of the last 4 weeks. He's thrown a touchdown in every game, in all but 2 games this year, and 2 touchdowns or more in 2 of those 4 games as well. So in the last 4 weeks, and he's had some tough matchups with Philly and the Giants in that mix too. Now he faces Washington. It's a much nicer matchup. He has Brandon Cooks back. He has Nico Collins back. He has Philip Dorsett. This is as healthy as the Texans' offense has been this year. Davis Mills could be a quiet back-end QB1 this week, at the very least a top 15 play. And he's obviously going to be ranked way outside of that this week.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, he actually impressed me with his performance against Philadelphia. I think it was a week or 2 ago.
Oh, yeah.
Where he threw for a touchdown or 2 and really kind of helped give them a run for their money. But yeah, going up against this Washington defense, I would tend to call last night kind of a fluke. I wouldn't expect the Commanders defense to come out and show out like that every week moving forward, because they've been pretty well mistake prone up to this point in the season. So Davis Mills could be a sneaky play this week.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught it in that game, but Jamean Davis was wearing the green dot, not Cameron Curl, which was a surprising development.
I got a notification of that. Right. Yeah, I thought that was surprising.
Yeah, on a side note there. But those are our quarterback pickups. Let's move on to the running back, meat of the offensive position. Although it's a little bit more thin like bologna in the last few weeks. But listen, we had hits last week at least. Jeff Wilson in his trade to Miami. We talked about him potentially even taking over this backfield, and he kind of did just that, 119 yards and a tutty this past week. And I brought up, which somewhat proud about, and he was probably rostered, so it doesn't really matter. I talked about the RB2 role in San Francisco last week. And I brought up TDP because if Elijah Mitchell missed, and Elijah Mitchell, me and Brandon talked about on the show last week about Elijah Mitchell. If he's active, might be a sneaky type of guy and shouldn't be on the waiver wire because of how San Fran runs it. And we saw this past week that they split carries for no freaking reason, but that's how San Fran does it. Chris McCaffrey didn't get every single touch. They split it with Elijah Mitchell. And honestly, we talked about that with Elijah Mitchell, who had 18 touches, 89 yards last week. But let's get into this week. I'm going to start off with 3 names that they're probably rostered in your leagues, but they're incredibly important to me that you have them. So make sure they are not on the wire. That is Rachaad White of Tampa Bay, who showed out this week, took the job from Leonard Fournette, who suffered a hip pointer. They are on bye this week. Fournette's expected to be okay. But also simultaneously, the Bucs expect to give Rachaad White the job for at least the rest of the way, and he's earned that right now. So Rachaad White is definitely a must-own. Gus Edwards, all these players are above 50%. He is going to be facing Carolina this week. He should be the starter. I don't think it'll be Kenny Drake. I think it'll be Gus Edwards, and I would be playing him this week, so he definitely shouldn't be on your wire, as well as Brian Robinson, who got 26 carries last night as Washington ran the ball, and then thought about it and then ran the ball some more. So all those names are above 50% owned, which is why we're not going to be talking about them in depth, but all those names that we wanted to bring up. Welcome to the chat, Ben Hartley. We see that question. We're going to get to it at the end of the offensive segment. So we are gonna get to that, as well as your question, Sebastian, from before. All right. Running backs, though, Axton, which did you have any thoughts on the names I just rattled off? Because I just threw a lot of stuff at everybody.
I've kind of been interested in Pacheco since he's been taking that lead role from Clyde Edwards-Helaire the last few weeks. Yeah, he hasn't really produced a whole lot until this most recent week. I don't recall exactly what he had stat-wise, but I know it was significantly better than prior weeks, and on top of more touches. The only concern here is just McKinnon's consistent usage in this offense is going to kind of limit what Pacheco is going to do and how quickly he might develop. I think he's just kind of going to be like a slow burn. I think he might be someone that just takes a little bit longer to really gain some traction. Not even sure if he gains that traction by the end of the year, but definitely somebody that's getting the volume that you like to see. Somebody who's getting the touches, the usage, and just has the opportunity. You want all the opportunity. You want the guy who's going to have the ball in his hands. And this Chiefs offense really likes once they get down inside the 10-yard line, they like to try to punch it in. They like to throw those trick plays from the backfield and try to catch the defense sleeping. So I really like Pacheco's. I've kind of liked his outlook since even the combine where he led all running backs with that 40 time. He's kind of somebody I'm more looking forward to for the future, but somebody that you could consider rostering.
The Chiefs running backs, for the first time this season, we feel like we got some clarity this week, where it was a near even split. Pacheco got his highest snap share of the season by far, 56%. He was currently his highest prior to that was like 30, and it was a very even split with him and Jerick McKinnon, who saw 38%. And McKinnon now has seen 2 weeks in a row of 8 targets, exactly 8 targets 2 weeks in a row. Nothing on the ground because that's Pacheco. 16 carries this week. Got it done on the ground, 5 yards per carry. He was very good this past week. And they faced the Chargers. We have mentioned the Chiefs every single week, and every single week it feels like we are 1 week off. And I think this is it. This is a Chargers defense that just lost Christian Covington's, lost their rookie who got her Otito Ogbonna, as well as they cut Jerry Tillery last week. This is a terrible Chargers run defense. And I think Pacheco is an early down guy in what should be a favorable game script can actually get it done this week. CH is phased out. I think they phased him out. I think it's done. So I think Pacheco's the early down guy. I think McKinnon's the receiving guy. And McKinnon's been doing it despite game script. But I think I'll play Pacheco with some confidence this week. Dare I say, some confidence.
So, yeah, I agree. I do like that matchup with against the Chargers. They're really struggling with Everett going down this week. Now you got Keenan Allen still is still dealing with his injury, and Mike Williams is now out for several weeks. They really are. They're digging deep into that wide receiver core. I'd imagine that they're not going to be they're not going to have the ball near as much in this game. If the Chiefs can get up early, that just means more trash time touches for Isaiah Pacheco.
On that topic of bringing him up as well, Mike Williams, just because it's a nice little segue on Sebastian asking before, do we think Mike Williams plays this week? I do think he returns to practice this week. I don't think he plays this week. I think it's going to be a tough ask for him to do it on this week. And I think we could aim for a week 12 return. And I think that kind of lines up with him not being on the IR and it kind of being a 3-week thing instead of a 4-week thing. I don't think they're going to rush him back given his history. So I do think he returns next week. Any disagreement with that?
No, I mean, you kind of see it on the same team with Keenan Allen. He's kind of been someone that they've hinted at playing about every week. He practices in some form or fashion. So I don't see why they would want to rush Mike Williams back and put him in the same, essentially could be in the same position as Keenan Allen, where you rush him back too early, then the rest of the season, he's just kind of dealing with this lingering injury. So I think they probably play it safe this week, and if he's just returns to practice this week, I would imagine that they're going to give him the week off and probably try to get him to return next week for week 12.
Nobody's accused the Chargers doctors of being geniuses, to be honest, but that's what we would expect. The last running back we want to be talking about is Keontae Ingram. So we had a surprise cut yesterday. Eno Benjamin of the Arizona Cardinals found himself released mid-afternoon on Monday. And that shapes up the RB2 role to be Keontae Ingram, who got some run this past week as well, back up to James Conner. James Conner has missed a lot of time in his career. Keontae Ingram is the rookie. This is very much looking like a lost season for the Cardinals. And I think they like Keontae Ingram based on the usage we've seen in situations that we wouldn't expect to see him. it's indicative that the team wants to see what they have in their rookie. And at the very least, when running back is as bare as it is, I think you could pick him up. Maybe he has a 1B role that you are interested in, like Chase Edmonds of years past, even. And if he doesn't, he's a high value handcuff to a very injury prone running back. So I think Keontae Ingram is somebody that's available in almost every single league right now that shouldn't be, and well worth the stash, especially this late in the season.
Yeah, I mean, James Conner's missed more games than he's played this year, and the fact that I was honestly a little shocked to see Benjamin gets cut so abruptly just because of the amount of usage that they gave him while James Conner was out. But at the same time, kind of like what you mentioned, they were giving Keontae Ingram the touches, and they like what they saw with when they sprinkled him in there. So that just kind of solidifies their confidence in the rookie. So definitely worth a stash, especially when we got 6+ weeks left of the season. Definitely plenty of time for him to get in there and have a chance to get some touches.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's the type of thing that we mentioned with Jack Sanborn before. It just makes sense with teams that are struggling. So good time to mention as well right now. Be sure to keep on dropping questions. I see a lot of them in the chat as well. We're going to get to them at the end of the offensive segments. We're going to go wide receivers, tight ends. We're going to answer every question that you guys got after that, offense or defense. Starting off with the offense because we talked about the defense before, but obviously we are the IDP guys. We're here to answer your IDP questions. So keep dropping them in the chat. We're obviously seeing them right now. So let's move on to the wide receiver position. Last week, talk about Philip Dorsett if Cooks or Nico missed. Honestly, neither did, so kind of a minimal role. I brought up Jarvis Landry, somebody I was actually sneakily excited about. Somewhat honestly, genuinely disappointed, and 3 catches on 6 targets for 37 yards. I thought he would get at least 5 catches against that Steelers team, but no such luck for the Saints. But on the same level, I was confidently saying Zay Jones, who I've been quietly happy about all year long, and he got it done. 10 targets. He's been seeing a lot of targets this year. 8 catches for 68 yards. He's the type of guy that I think we're going to be talking about in the offseason as we're going to go back and look at the leaders and categories, and we're going to see him being very high in a lot of them. And he's seeing like exactly 8 targets a week. Yeah.
Nobody's going to see it coming, but you're right. At the end of the season, he is. He's getting like at least a 6 or 8 target minimum every game. Even guys like Evan Ingram and Kirk are kind of, I think Kirk's been pretty reliable, but yeah, they've been up and down. He's been pretty well the one staple piece of this offense. Not that's been really taking advantage of all of his opportunities, but he's been serviceable. He's definitely you could do worse. You can do far worse, and he
just hasn't scored. Yeah, he just hasn't scored. Mm-hmm. So he's establishing that 6 to 8 to 10 point floor, but he's not getting the touchdowns, and nobody cares. Because people are chasing the higher ones. But he's been quietly productive this year, especially in PPR formats. So I can't wait to clip this for later. But we mentioned, obviously, Cooper Kupp being out this past week. Quick talk on the Rams here. Allen Robinson is still 62% rostered in Yahoo League, so he's probably not available. But I do expect him to be the wide receiver 1 in lieu of this. I expect Van Jefferson to also have a pretty sizable role. I would want to be rostering both. Van Jefferson probably more available right now in your leagues. That said, Cooper Kupp's absence is catastrophic for everybody. This is a Rams team that can't move the ball and hasn't been able to score touchdowns and haven't been able to stay on the field. Losing Cooper Kupp doesn't solve any of those issues. In fact, I'd say it hurts them. So you might get a higher floor for guys like Van Jefferson and Allen Robinson, guys that really haven't had floors this season, and Van Jefferson obviously being hurt for most of it. But I'm still not that excited. Losing Cooper Kupp does not help the rest of the guys in this room. Wide receiver is very different than running back in that way.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't mean that he's going to come in and take that Cooper Kupp role. I don't imagine. He might see a similar kind of target share, but I don't imagine that he's really going to produce anything like what you would expect out of Kupp anyways.
I think Van Jefferson could be quietly more productive than Allen Robinson in this. But either way, I want to be picking up both and seeing how it works out. But let's get into this one. The biggest name of the week, one of the biggest names of Sunday, Christian Watson, rookie out of North Dakota State, announced himself in a major way. He immediately went out there, dropped a deep touchdown, and then decided, hey, after doing it all season long, he's not going to do it anymore, and lit up every single aspect of the secondary there in Dallas. He had 3 touchdowns. He was clearly the alpha in this team, the 40% target type of guy. And they've wanted him to be this. They want him to be what they wanted Marquez Valdes-Scantling to be, was the deep threat that actually has some reliability to him. I wasn't a huge fan of him coming out, so color me somewhat skeptical. But while Romeo Dubs is out, and while Randall Cobb is out, and while this team needs somebody to step up, Christian Watson's doing that. And they want him to do that. So he's going to get every opportunity to do so. Christian Watson should probably be one of the hottest waiver wire names this week for offense, and for good reason. He could genuinely be a league winner this year.
Yeah. I've been kind of disappointed because I'm coming out of the draft and after the combine and the draft, I was particularly excited about his opportunity. You know, I didn't expect him to come out and just kill a bear all year long and just be, but I mean, just being in this offense with the situation that he was coming into just lended well to a great opportunity. So I was kind of excited about him beginning of the season. Then he's just kind of had this injury that's been lingering, and I think it's probably affected him more than a lot of us want to believe. But it really showed this last week where I think he might have had a point where he seems like he's feeling better. You know, it's definitely not affecting him near as much because he's essentially, you know, hopped into the same role and just taken on more targets this last week. So definitely going to want to grab him this week. If you don't, he's not going to be there next week. That's for sure.
Yeah. 84% snaps. That's the season high. 8 targets. That's the season high. 4 catches, which is a season high. 4 catches and 8 targets isn't honestly that great, but getting 107 yards on those 4 catches is, and 3 touchdowns on it as well. But to add some juice to the argument as well, Tennessee this next week, which is a top tier matchup. Couple tough ones after that, but then playoffs, he has the Rams, Miami, and Minnesota. And if you play in Week 18, you can add Detroit to that list. So those are all top half matchups for Christian Watson to take advantage, and really could lead you to a fantasy championship this year, and somebody that I expect to get it. He'll still have a role even when Romeo Dubs come back. I feel fairly confident about that they do not want Sammy Watkins on the field. So Christian Watson, number one wide receiver pickup for this week by far. Probably the number one offensive pickup as well.
You're not wrong. And this Green Bay offense, although it's been kind of mediocre all year, it seemed like they really gained some traction last week. They were really looking a lot better than they had leading up to that point. So you can only hope that things kind of trend in a similar direction. And if that's the case, I would imagine he's going to be heavily involved.
Yep. They're a team that plays much better at home as well. Paris Campbell is this next name. Now, anybody that's followed me knows that I've been on the Paris Campbell train for months, years, one would say. And in one of my leagues, I'm sad to report that I did actually trade him when I desperately needed a quarterback, and I traded from Jimmy Garoppolo in week 5. However, in my other leagues, we are rejoicing. This is a proud reminder that Paris Campbell is a good wide receiver. And if anybody as well, it pays to not just follow us on this amazing show, but follow our Twitters, where I put out Paris Campbell truth all summer long, and then it takes 8 weeks to formulate. But Paris Campbell
kind of been the story of your calls this year.
It feels that way. Travis Etienne,
got another one we're gonna hit. Yeah, exactly.
all my guys took 8 weeks, except for Chase Edmonds, who just took never. But whatever. Paris Campbell, 39 targets the last 5 weeks. He's at 29 catches on those 39. 39 targets in 5 weeks is an insane number. He has 261 yards and 3 touchdowns in that span. Michael Pittman has his role. Paris Campbell has his. And right now, Alec Pierce is on the sideline as two Paris Campbell in the 2 wide receiver sets. Matt Ryan is good for Paris Campbell. And Paris Campbell, my whole argument over the summer was that he doesn't need 39 targets to do it. And we saw it this past week. He took 1 catch, 40 yards to the house. You know, he's getting the volume as well. I hit my own light for that. But, like, if he's getting the volume, which is great, but he doesn't even need it to be fantasy viable because he can do it on one play because he is a big play threat. So, Paris Campbell, it's happening. It's real. He's a good player, and I buy it.
How do you feel about him with or Michael Pittman now that Campbell's really come on the last 4 or 5 weeks. That's kind of been where Pittman's really taken a dip. And he hasn't really been worthy of a start even the last 4 or 5 weeks.
They are both alphas, and they will both be fine eventually. Michael Pittman. I think the problem is right now is that there's just not enough volume to go around, and also Sam Ehlinger was a death knell to everything in this team. In fact, we just got tweeted out that the new Colts play caller, Parks Frazier, changed 10% of the game plan when they decided to go with Matt Ryan over Sam Ehlinger. Ryan told him before the game, "Call it like you see it, and we're going to make you right." Called it like you see it. Through it to Paris Campbell. I do think Michael Pittman's going to have a strong second half of the year as long as Matt Ryan is out there, which honestly, he should be.
That's his favorite target for sure, no doubt. It's just encouraging. I like seeing Paris Campbell getting these double-digit targets.
Oh, yeah.
On a weekly basis. Last one we got on this list. Yeah, it does. It does. It feels good to finally hit on all these, doesn't it? It's all finally coming to fruition.
Go on. Give us our last name, our last wide receiver action.
Michael Gallup, Dallas Cowboys wide receiver. He's kind of been disappointed. We're hoping for a little bit more at him since he returned from injury, but plays the Vikings this week. He's got a good opportunity to get back on track. He's always out there. He's always running his routes. He's yet to crack even the 50-yard receiving mark, but we're kind of hoping he gets back to form in this good matchup this week. This Dallas offense has been running on all cylinders as of late, so I don't see why Michael Gallup couldn't take a decent chunk of CeeDee Lamb's share, especially from last week, and still have plenty to, for everybody else to get their fantasy relevant numbers as well. So could be a sneaky pickup.
Yeah, he ran a route at 88% of his time, 88% of his snaps last week, which is a very high number. He saw 7 targets off of it. He's seen 6 or more targets 3 of the last 4 weeks. They just haven't really resulted in catches. He had some drop issues when he was coming back, and he's coming off a big injury. I do think it's fair to give him some time to come back from that. And Minnesota, I really expect that to be a complete shootout. I'm not sure what the over-under is right now off the top of my head, but I do expect both teams, both offenses show up in it. Let's jump over to the tight ends. Obviously, very important week for the tight ends. We had Dallas Goedert go down now expected to miss several weeks with a shoulder injury. We have Zach Ertz now done for the year, and we have any number of disappointments as well.
Darren Waller got put on IR.
Darren Waller's out for the year. That's right. Yep, that's a good one. And someone else as well. I already said Zach Ertz. But last week we mentioned Cole Kmet. Axton put him on the dock, and I was like, you got to talk about him because Cole Kmet is your guy, Mike. And I've been on Cole Kmet's train all year long, and I thought it might have been too good to be true this past week. But I'm in. Cole Kmet, I hope you picked him up last week. I am so happy this is happening because I think Cole Kmet is a good tight end. I've loved Justin Fields, and I've been waiting for this to happen for freaking 8 weeks of the freaking season. Mm-hmm. But
he came out of nowhere, man. Didn't do much of anything all year, and then bam, 4 touchdowns in 2 weeks, and he's suddenly Justin Fields' favorite red zone target.
I think it's possible that Chase Claypool existing unlocked Cole Kmet somehow.
Ever since they traded for him, things have really been rolling. I think they kind of had some momentum when they picked him up or when they signed him, and then for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just his presence out there, keeps defenses honest. Because, beforehand I was concerned all year long about how is this offense going to produce anything whenever all the defense has to do is just kind of keep an extra eye on Mooney and who they don't have a whole lot else to throw to. But just having another talented wide receiver out there to, you can't double team Chase Claypool because Mooney is talented enough to take those targets, and you can't double. So just keeping defenses honest. I think the presence out there is just making that much of a difference. It's wild to see.
The Bears have figured it out. And the other name brought up last week, Cade Otton. Disappointing. He actually outsnapped Cam Brate in Cam Brate's return. I was hoping Cam Brate would miss another week, but Otton still play ahead of him, but only resulted in a few targets, a few catches, didn't get it done for fantasy. A little bit disappointing, but that rapport is building, and I think he's still a very good dynasty stash going forward. And before we get into the names for this week, we have 3 names I want to throw out there. Last week we brought up or 2 weeks ago we brought up Greg Dulcich, and disappointing week. Obviously, only 1 catch on 11 targets. I'm still very in on Greg Dulcich. When you could check out my rankings, do the tight end rankings for the IDP guys, it'll be up on the site later tonight. If you're a subscriber, which if you're not, what are you doing? Let's be honest. But he had 71 of 80 snaps. He took 40 of them in line. He took 25 slot snaps and 6 out wide. He had 40 routes on 49 of Russ's dropbacks. That is primo usage. I am still going to be riding Greg Dulcich to the moon despite his poor performance, especially with Judy potentially missing time. I think Greg Dulcich is. I'm still totally on board with this. I just want to throw that out there before we get into these names. Foster Moreau, name number 1. I think you actually put that name down, Axton. So I'll let you take that one away.
Hey, yeah, no problem. With Darren Waller out for, is he done for the season or is it short-term IR? I want to say that I thought I
let's say the
short-term.
Let's say the Raiders are done for the season as a team, which means Darren Waller will probably be done for the season with his team.
Likely, most likely.
Which could be the same for Cooper Kupp as well.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Foster Moreau is coming in replacement of Darren Waller. This last week, he saw 3 catches, or he saw 4 targets, caught 3 of those, even found the end zone. I don't know how I feel about a week-to-week, reliability of him. But if you need a streamer for the week, your top tight end is out. Or, I mean, honestly, he might be. If there's nothing else out there as far as tight ends and you actually need to start for the rest of the season, say you did lose, Darren Waller, and Foster Moreau is going to be he's going to be more involved. Isn't Hunter Renfrow also on IR?
Yes, he is.
So I think, maybe he is a good streamer for the remainder of the season. I would imagine that he should see a healthy amount of targets, especially with those 2. That's a good 12 targets a game. That's got to go somewhere. Devontae Adams he might get 20 in one game, but the next game he might not. So that's kind of how we're seeing this Raiders offense run right now. Is just kind of whoever's kind of got that hot hand. A lot of time, more often than not, it's probably going to be Devontae Adams, but Foster Moreau is definitely going to be seeing a healthy amount of targets moving forward. So I definitely like him for a streaming option.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Another name I want to throw out there. Hayden Hurst, who is available in 52% of Yahoo leagues. He's established kind of a good flow with Jamar Chase being out. He's had 6 receptions, 5 receptions, 4 receptions in the last 3 weeks. And while the Steelers have been fairly stingy against the tight end position this year, I am not that concerned. I think there's a team that's going to be slumbering into next week, and I don't think that they're going to be able to stop it, especially with Mick Fitzpatrick potentially missing more time with the appendicitis issue. I think that Hayden Hurst could have a strong week this week, at the very least have a good floor. And in addition to that, he has Tennessee and KC right after. So I'm willing to play Hayden Hurst in both those matchups, whether Jamar Chase is back or not. Jamar Chase is still on crutches, so I don't even expect him to be back anytime soon. So I'm willing to play him this week as a low-end tight end 1 play, and I'm willing to play him as a top 8 tight end play the next 2 weeks after that. So somebody that is the type of preemptive pickup that makes sense is the one that you want to be a little bit ahead of for this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, and a high-powered offense missing a top playmaker, he's definitely got better chance to grab a few more balls, especially against some defenses that are really allowing a lot of production to really about every offense. I know the Chiefs, for example, were among the bottom half of the league in just about every category when it comes to allowing fantasy points to quarterbacks, tight ends, running backs, wide receivers. They were top 15 on every single one of those lists. So, and I believe Tennessee was on a number of those as well. I couldn't recall off the top of my head how they were doing against tight ends, but
not great.
Right, exactly. So you're looking at probably likely 2 bottom 15 defenses after, and the Steelers are right there with them too. So definitely a good slate of games they got coming up in the schedule. So Hurst could be definitely a good streamer in that time. Our last tight end we got is rookie Trey McBride. But Zach Ertz injured. Not sure the extent.
He's done for the year. Done for the
year. Okay, Trey McBride. This is exactly kind of what they drafted him for. With Ertz getting up there in age, they needed a young tight end to come in and make some plays and be a good fill-in, and just in case of retirement in the future, injuries, whatever the case may be with an aging tight end, Trey McBride's going to get his chance. So this last week he saw 69% route participation with Zach Ertz down, 27 routes run on 87% of the snaps. So the strong snap share, you love to see that. I know Hollywood's coming back, so it limits upside a little bit. But the tight end position in this offense seems to be very valuable. All year long, Zach Ertz has put up reliable numbers at the tight end position. Trey McBride is arguably just as talented. I would imagine that he's probably going to ultimately pivot those targets over to Trey McBride, and I would imagine that's pretty well going to be it. It's going to be a pretty smooth transition, I would imagine. They love their tight ends in Arizona.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I am somewhat worried for the next 2 weeks for him because he just has really tough matchups. San Fran is, perennially very good against the tight end. They've done again this year, as well as the Chargers this year have been good because Derwin James has been healthy and Derwin James locks down tight ends. But after the bye, after the Week 13 bye, once you get into the fantasy championships, New England, that's a top 10 matchup. You have Denver, which is a top 20 matchup. Tampa, top 12. And Atlanta after that, which is another top 10 matchup. The usage is there. We see how rookies blossom after bye week. So maybe we're just early to this with Trey McBride, and you don't need to stash him in normal tight end formats. But in tight end premium, I don't mind picking him up, or at the very least, being prepared for the slow start and a meteoric rise type of thing. Because I do think he's a name that we're going to be bringing up and again in a few weeks. Just because I don't think his ownership's going to be as high as it should be when he gets into the juicier matchups.
Yeah, definitely agree. Those strong matchups do kind of make you hesitate a little bit. So if at all costs you can avoid a start with him, we'll just kind of, like you said, wait for that slow burn to kind of really pick up here and maybe in the next few weeks. So just kind of pick him up and hold tight onto him, and he could prove reliable for you come playoff time in fantasy.
Yes, sir. Let's get into the offensive questions as well as defensive questions as well. So if you're in the chat right now, keep dropping them in, as well as if you're listening afterwards, be sure to keep tuning in because these are the questions that you're probably asking because we're coming from other people, live people in the chat. So at the top, let's see what we have already answered, what we haven't. So let's start with the defensive questions, even though I have an offensive banners on there. From Ben Hartley. Short benches, I'm guessing, not just beaches, and only 2 injured reserve spots. It is Dynasty. Does he drop Brandon Jones for Andre Sisco? Andre Sisco being the Jaguars safety. Brandon Jones obviously being the Miami injured safety currently. I feel like I would want to know who else is on your IR spot if you can just put Brandon Jones on that. But if you're still around to give us that context, but let's just say in a vacuum, if you were dropping Brandon Jones or Andre Sisco, what are you thinking there, Axton?
Oh, I don't know. They're kind of putting up, just from taking a quick glance at stats and snaps and stuff, they're pretty well producing pretty similarly. I know you mentioned earlier that you're hands off all Miami defensive backs. So I wouldn't be opposed to going with an Andre Sisco. Jaguars defense has been very good. This season, surprisingly enough, they've been very solid and very effective. So I wouldn't be opposed to dropping Brandon Jones and grabbing Andre Sisco.
I'd probably hold on to Brandon Jones myself just because they're both young guys, and I do expect Miami to splurge, and I expect the Jaguars to splurge on this defense. Both could be very different next year. Man, I'm very hands-off with Miami's secondary with Brandon Jones out because we have been playing a roulette of Eric Rowe and everybody else in that backfield or in that secondary. So you know what?
One maybe that you can rely on in this defense.
I do expect both these guys to be challenged next year by starters. I don't think Sisco's walking into the job next year uncontested. I don't think Brandon Jones goes into the year next year contested. But I do think Brandon Jones is a better player slightly. So I think I lean Brandon Jones, but they're both very close. I think we're splitting hairs right now. If you need somebody to play, obviously Sisco gets the edge there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would kind of tend to agree. You see Brandon Jones as maybe a better talent. Maybe it might not be a bad idea to kind of hold on to him. Just because, like we talked about, you're kind of splitting hairs here. They're both similarly producing defensive backs. So may not give up on Brandon Jones just quite yet.
Yes, sir. We have another question here, coming in here from Premium I don't know if it's UTA or UTA. By the way, respect the 2K18 YouTube logo, right? He said he just lost Cooper Kupp. I apologize. And someone listed Austin Eckler for a trade. Any thoughts? Also, I could send Kupp away. So this is obviously, he also said my team is mega actually wants to get rid of him. That is just assuming Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Deshaun Watson, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Rondell Moore, and Debo and Dalton Schultz. My goodness, what a lineup you got there. I mean, I'm assuming this is Dynasty because obviously if he's in redraft, then you are probably not able to trade him because he is out for 4 to 6 weeks and we only have 6 to 8 weeks left in the season max. So it doesn't look like you need Eckler. Let's be honest here. I mean, Eckler is great, but you're not benching Henry, not benching Saquon, you're not benching Jacobs anytime soon. So I'd be trying to flip. Looking at if I could flip Kupp for something, I'd be flipping for receivers and trying to get younger in Dynasty right now. But you've probably missed your sell window, to be completely honest. You're selling him probably at your lowest point. His value is guaranteed to rise over the offseason and over the next few weeks, even if the small chance of him coming back. So, I mean, I probably would be holding Cooper Kupp myself, but what do you think?
I agree. That's exactly kind of where I was going. Was if you're looking to trade Kupp and you're that stacked, I'm not trying to get rid of Kupp at absolute bottom value. You know, you hold it out this offseason. Yes, it's going to be a long offseason, but when you get that first week and he picks up right where he left off, you're going to be glad that you can get full value out of him.
Yes, sir. And even if he doesn't, you can sell it on the concept of him just coming back. It's not like an ACL. It's something he should easily recover from with
facts. Yeah,
8 months of recovery.
This offseason, you can make a good argument to sell. Absolutely.
Yeah. And another question here from Dr. Clutch. Would you trade Chris Godwin for Chris Olave and Rachaad White in a PPR format? Yes. Yes, I would. I think Chris Olave has been very close to producing exactly what Chris Godwin is producing, if not outproducing him. I think we can honestly say more often than not. And Rachaad White is taking over right now. And Chris Olave has a juicy end of your schedule. He has one matchup outside of the top 20, most of which are in the top 10. So Chris Olave to the moon, Rachaad White to the moon, Chris Godwin can stay on earth.
Yeah, if you're getting both Olave and Rachaad White for Chris Godwin, that's quite an offer. I'd smash and don't turn back.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the rare ones that works for both redraft as well as dynasty. If you get Olave and Rachaad White for Chris Godwin right now, do it. Redraft, dynasty, keeper, don't matter. I would definitely do that, Dr. Clutch. All right. Well, that is our show for this week. I appreciate everyone for tuning in, as well as all the questions this week. Super fun as always. So thank you guys for checking this out. IDP Guys Waiver Wire Show, week 11 here. We're going to be going on to week 12 next week, next Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Central, right? Math. Yeah, there you go, Axton. You're giving that nod right there that you can't see on the
yeah,
thank you.
Right.
I always mess up my time zones, but be sure to be checking out the IDP Guys on Twitter at IDP Guys. You can check out ourselves at me at Michael __Sicoli. Follow Axton at Harding_3. It's where, listen, we talk about waiver wire shows on Tuesday, but as we saw last week, Blake Martinez retires on a Wednesday. We're not hopping on another show, so check out our Twitters. We're putting out info just like that. We were like, Jayon Brown, pick him up. Luke Masterson, pick him up. So be sure to be checking out our Twitters as well as the IDP Guys, because where all the amazing stuff comes out. And make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, as well as checking out Apple Podcasts, where all of our stuff goes to. Anyway, depends on how you want to ingest your medium. We're here for you. So thank you guys for tuning in. We will be back next week. Good luck on your waivers. Good luck on your week 11 matchups. Trade deadline's coming up. Play it safe. Let us know if you have any questions.